Okay, thank you very much to all of you and to Aid and Sam and Nazir for agreeing to be on the panel. I'm actually come here to share a lot of my confusion and hopefully leave you with some confusion as well. But before I do that, I want to start with a framing of a problem. Framing of a problem by what if problems in the world were framed by not by the likes of us or by the people who are sitting in Wall Street or by the people who are sitting in Congress or by the people who are sitting inside universities, but by people who are at the receiving end of what we call development, progress, prosperity. So this is actually a story from Odisha, the state that these two are from. And Odisha is an eastern coastal state, and it is reputed to have one of the poorest districts, but is also the richest in terms of mineral wealth. And that is the curse of that district. It is rich in bauxite, and rich in iron ore and coal. And so there's a very notorious company called Vedanta, which came to mine bauxite in a hill that was revered as sacred by a community of indigenous people called Dongriya Khons. Dongriya Khons are classified as primitive tribes. They don't call themselves primitive, they just call themselves Dongriyas. And the government of India calls them primitive. They put up a very, very staunch fight against the mining of the bauxite, on their sacred hill, the Niyamagiri. And subsequently, the matter also went to Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, unless the villagers allow you to, you will not be allowed to mine it. And the villagers did not allow them to. But the fight is not over, because the people who want the bauxite will keep coming. If the law is the one that permits the indigenous people to protect their land, then the law will be changed, and that has to be fought. But here the issue is not about the legal issues, about how Lado Sikaka, this elder from this Dongriya Khon community, looks at the hill, looks at his purpose in life, and the resolve with which he speaks. If you can start. There were a couple of things that really struck me in this. One, this person who looks materially not very wealthy talks about the government and big companies looting their wealth. And what wealth is he referring to is one. And the second is that there is no talk about sustainable mining, climate smart mining, none of that bullshit. It is very clear. No mining. End of story. And there are other people like him and several other. If there is no mining, then this talk is not happening. I'm not coming here. But that's what they're talking about. So the vision of prosperity and development, everything good, comes from this worldview, which says that mining cannot happen because mining will destroy the most precious things. And mining will be gone in 30 years. The hilltop will be gone. With it, all the 36 streams that feed the Vansadhara River will be gone. All life over there will be gone. And the mining only has 30-year life cycle. If the mining were not done, then as long as the hill is there, life can exist. So I think it is a civilizational conflict. And that brings me to this whole issue of climate change, a kind of a rubric that I'm beginning to be very, very uncomfortable with, because everything is about climate change. If your grandmother has arthritis, we'll have to find a climate connection to it. How much carbon is saved by curing her, as opposed to how much is saved by just letting her die. Everything has to be talked about in the carbon metrics. Everything has to be justified in a climate metric. But is climate change really the problem? Because this man who was talking about something so serious, about an ecological crisis, about a civilizational conflict, did not mention the phrase climate change. I've been involved in community struggles against coal-fired power plants for more than a decade. And there is not one time that we've used climate change as a phrase in this fight against a coal-fired power plant. To the people of the Ennore Creek, which is a large tidal wetland, which is being spoiled by the coal-fired power plants, the battle is not for climate. The battle is for the local land use change. The battle is to ensure that the tidal wetland is protected, that just like the Niyamgiri hilltop, as long as the wetland is healthy, the people are protected from cyclones, their livelihood is ensured, and for generations to come, there will be prosperity. So it is a fight against a land use degradation that they are fighting for. It is not a fight on the issue of climate. However, the reduction of the problem to a climate change problem, to a problem of climate change, we've just kind of, all of us have jumped onto the bandwagon without questioning who has created this bandwagon. How do those people define a problem? What do those, if they define the problem in a certain way, if you look at climate change, the problem has been defined as one of excess too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. A very, very technical kind of a description of a huge problem. And then the solution to that is in somehow either reducing the amount of carbon in the atmosphere and reducing the emissions of carbon. And that has then been reduced to what fuel are we using? It is coal, it is oil, it is gas. And as long as we change from coal, oil, and gas to something else that is cleaner, everything will be fine. So we're talking about green energy. We're talking about these things: green capitalism, green consumerism, Green New Deal, a lot of green things, with many little green people running around this planet. The issue is that solar, coal cannot, solar and wind and other renewables cannot power or fuel an inherently unsustainable economy. Our economic model is wrong. Our economic model celebrates competition, it celebrates predation, it celebrates exploitation of nature and people. And that economic model cannot be cleaned up just by greening the energy source. And even with the whole capitalist model, I don't think that when we're talking about capitalism with a human face, it means that we are not willing to let go of capitalism, and capitalism by itself does not have a human face, and somehow that human face, a nice smiley picture, must be pasted onto capitalism, and that becomes welfare capitalism. A little bit of the loot gained from exploiting nature can then be shared more equitably. So in this, what I see is that some of the underlying problems, this addiction to this metric of growth as the only way to ensure that people's quality of life, and I'm talking very specifically about quality of life, which has very little to do with only a limited amount of correlation with material, and a lot more to do with community and relationships with the land and with people. That growth addiction has not been at all addressed. So in none of the United Nations meetings do we see these extremely bright minds talking about the fundamental, the elephant in the room, which is growth, which is overconsumption. If you look at this place, there is this afternoon we were talking to some people. There are so many empty rooms in this. It is a huge place. We can settle half of Chennai over here. Whenever I look at this place, I'm like, what is your problem with immigration? I mean, we have so many people. We can send you. And an acre of land will make, will create livelihoods for 7, 8 people. And here we just have a family having 200, 300 acres, and a university having so many empty rooms. And those empty rooms are all heated, they're all lit up, and we're killing people for that lighting and heating and what we call energy. And somehow we are saying that we will just change everything by having windmills rotating to ensure that empty rooms are heated. I think the question about whether empty rooms should first of all exist, where is the need for an empty room, maximize the amount of, because this room is not just energy in terms of what is lighting it and what is heating it, but also energy in terms of what it's built with. And so I think all these things also need to be looked at. So one of the things is that, the global green energy cheerleaders, of which there are many, start cheering every time India or China say, we will construct 200 gigawatts of solar power by 2020. First of all, that is impossible, and they don't intend to do it. And even if they do it, it is not likely to make any difference to the lives of the people in India. So there is the other part of it, which has also been said in this document called the nationally determined commitments. And this is something that was submitted by the government of India in the Paris Convention. And there, the government of India says that half of India remains to be built. You should look at the mess that India is in right now. And that is just half the amount of construction. And if you're saying we're going to have another half of the India built, it would be a disaster for us. And it's a disaster of a global scale. America being built, Europe being built has caused us this climate crisis. It is not just the burning of the coal. I just read this very interesting article about the Navajo Nation and how 17,000 Navajo Native Americans were kicked out of their homeland in order to make way for a coal mine. And that coal was transported to a distant place using water, precious water from a very rich Navajo sandstone aquifer in an area that is arid. And in order to generate electricity to power Los Angeles and Las Vegas. So you actually have justified lighting up gambling dens, and use that as a justification for destroying an entire nation and future generations. I think that is the vulgarity that we're also looking at in India, because India is also following the same model that development means construction. And so another half of India remains to be constructed. What is also happening is that we are looking at increased mining, increased amount of built infrastructure, because development today only means covering open earth with concrete. And covering open earth with concrete does give us a lot of comforts. It is nice to be speaking over here rather than the cold of, actually today is a nice day, but the cold of yesterday's Minnesota or Minneapolis. But this also comes at a tremendous cost. It comes at a cost where we are made very vulnerable to climate change, to the effects, to the kind of consequences of climate change in the form of extreme weather events. And I will come to that as I go further. Because when you change the land use, when you degrade the land use, the land's ability to withstand shocks for you reduces. And so you're left more exposed and more in harm's way. Oh, sorry. So in India, of course, we have a whole range of programs. And right now, of course, the government of India governs by hashtag governance. So everything has a hashtag something, hashtag smart city, hashtag make in India, hashtag Sagarmala. So Sagarmala and Bharatmala are two flagship programs of the government of India, this government. And it is not very different from government to government. It's just like here, Democrat or Republican, messing around with the earth is something that is guaranteed, that is not going to change. The degree to which they do it and how they do it might be different. So here, Bharatmala is a program where about close to 54,000 kilometers of roads are going to be laid, of which a lot of them are very large roads. Very large roads means they are not for the local communities. Very large roads means that they connect points of manufacture to points of escape of those manufactured goods, bypassing communities on the way, because these are access controlled highways of the kind that you have over here. Except that in India, we are very densely populated, so you have villages and towns all along the way that will not be able to use the road. This is called the Sagarmala. Bharatmala and Sagarmala. Bharat is India and Mala is garland. And so it's a network of roads, it's like a garland. And Sagarmala, Sagar means the ocean and Mala means garland. So it's a garland along the ocean, which means a port-led development. Of course, in Tamil Nadu, we call this Sagarmala, which means a garland of death or a noose. And here, this port-led development basically envisages setting up ports all over and then having radial development from here, the hinterland, so that you can extract resources from here, manufacture it on the way, and send it out to other countries. It's called Make in India, Make for the World. So we will become a colony. And this is the government of India's policy. There's no British colonial interest sitting out there trying to wipe us out.
What's a CEZ?
Sorry? CEZ is a coastal economic zone. It's like a maquiladora, but on the coastal area. The good news is that there is not a single one of these projects that is not being contested. So there are ordinary people on the ground who are fighting against every road, every port, every airport. So one would wonder, in a country that is supposed to be developing, why is development being opposed? Because every single development project is being opposed, as a result of which the government calls us anti-development. And if you're anti-development, which means that if the stock market is not inching up and you're doing something to prevent that, then you're also anti-national. And you're likely to be a terrorist as well, saying a Pakistani agent, and a whole range of other problematic rubrics are brought in. You have the same in this country as well. If you're standing in the way, you're standing in the way of jobs. So if you're opposing a pipeline that runs through sacred land, the defense, the argument given is 270 jobs. or 2,700 jobs or 27,000 jobs. The point that is being made has been missed. These are some of the projects out of this. This one is in my home state, in a very fertile river delta called the Kaveri Delta, and which unfortunately also has hydrocarbon reserves. So people are out there trying to extract it. There's a conflict between the farmers and the hydrocarbon companies. And this year there was a marginal victory where one of the major political parties has actually said that that region will be declared a special agricultural zone if they come to power. They have a good chance of coming to power. So these are small kind of shifts that are happening in the minds of people. The reason why I point that out is it is not so much an issue of whether it can be done in a climate smart way or not. It's a value system that is being talked about. And in that value system, the question that is being asked is, do you value your agricultural land more than you value your oil, or vice versa? The answer often from the government is nothing is more valuable than oil. Nothing is more valuable than copper. Even your life is not more valuable than copper. And so copper has to come out, oil has to come out in order for goodness to flow. And that is what is being challenged at each of these places. And I see those challenges also happening in countries like United States, where I know that in Minnesota, there are Native American people who are fighting against a copper mine. That is an anti-development fight. They're saying this copper should not come out. For prosperity, for the well-being of this planet, the copper should remain inside the ground. Unfortunately, the world has only moved so far as to say coal must remain in the ground. Copper can come out. It is as if only coal causes damage, and copper doesn't. So these are some of the dreams that the government of Tamil Nadu. This is my home state, and I'm from the northern part of the state where it says Ennore. And these are all coal-fired power plants and ports and other designs the government has. This is just designs. This is just what the government wants to do. Whether they will get to do it or not depends upon whether we win or they win. And the fight is on in these places. So what we see over here, these are two kinds of infrastructure. That is the built infrastructure, and there is the unbuilt infrastructure. Unfortunately, when we say infrastructure, this image does not come to mind. When we say infrastructure, this does not look to us like water, but this is just water and biodiversity. It's like if you want to liken it to a factory, this is called a Shola grassland forest complex. It is a kind of forest type that is found, or a kind of habitat complex that is found in the Western Ghats in southern India. And these are water factories because the grassland kind of harvests the water and brings it into the folds where there's dense vegetation. From each of these things, you have streams or rivulets or rivers running up. And when it rains, these things just soak in the water. They're like sponges and they squeeze it out through the year. So many of these things are the headwaters of the major rivers in South India, because we don't have ice or snow in the south. But this is not seen as an infrastructure. In fact, in order to construct infrastructure like transmission towers or roads, these are called infrastructure by the government, they will even cut right across this. But at the same time, if I were to say, okay, I'm going to knock down these buildings and construct a green zone, that would be a criminal act because that is infrastructure. Whereas this is not. So that has got high value because it is built and it is private. This is low value because it is communal and it is unbuilt. And this part about communal or commons is something that I will keep coming back to, because that is there in the title of my presentation as well. There's the word Porambok. It's a beautiful word. Porambok is written in Tamil on top. It actually means places that are shared use commons, which are there in all cultures. And all native cultures celebrated. That's the only way they know of looking at land. And even in other cultures like settled agrarian cultures, this is a word from the medieval agrarian culture of Tamil Nadu. And Porambok is now become a dirty word. It means it's a word that you use to refer to people who you consider worthless. So you don't go to Chennai and call somebody Porambok because you get punched. It's a very dirty word. But how did such a beautiful word become a dirty word? The story behind that is the Porambok or these commons have only 3 rules. You cannot buy it or sell it. You cannot construct a roof on it, and you can't lay a floor. So which means for all practical purposes for development, these lands are useless. Because if you can't buy it or sell it, what's the fun in it? It's not real estate. No, you can't construct something. This is like you're taking the fun out of life. You're taking the the entire essence out of development and progress and prosperity and all that stuff. But these were the three rules, and these remain till date the rules that govern the Porombo. But unfortunately, in the British property making perspective, because this was not property in the strict sense of the word, this land became to be seen as wasteland, lands that do not yield revenue. And that has culturally moved to a point where culturally this word has degraded into meaning something that is worthless. This is now affecting a lot of what is happening with this land, with these kinds of spaces, because the government says this is anyway worthless land. This is anyway land that is not working for its keep. Let us put it to some work. Let us put it to some use. Let us extract some value from it by making it work. And we see the same thing also happening over here, because this is large, vast area that the Native Americans don't seem to be using. We would like to run a pipeline through it and extract value out of it. And so the same thing is also happening over here. From the coastal part of Tamil Nadu, these are one of the infrastructures, sand dunes, which basically protect us from cyclonic storms, from cyclonic winds, and also sand is like a huge reservoir of fresh water. And as it rains, it soaks it in and prevents the sea from coming in, because the sea is also like one of those Indian real estate agents. It likes to occupy more and more land, and it's constantly trying to come in and take over more land, not only above the surface, but also under the ground. So the groundwater aquifer is constantly a threat of salinization because of sea level rise and intrusion of the sea. And sand dunes, as long as there are sand dunes and large sandy beaches, those dunes trap fresh water, and the fresh water is much better at fighting salt water than any hard engineering structure is. You can't keep the seawater away by putting rocks underneath. But the fresh water forms a kind of a lens underground, and as long as you have dunes and you have sand, you'll have a wall of fresh water that stands like a guard, preventing the seawater from coming in. You level the sand dunes, or take away the sand from the beach, or encroach into the beach saying, I want a sea view apartment, then you're kind of harming your first line of defense against the sea's intrusion into your ground. Estuaries, again, areas of great biological diversity, and these are also areas that are very important shock absorbers, because this is where the water that falls on land leaves. If the estuaries are encroached upon, then you have flooding inland, and you've seen that the estuaries can be encroached upon by just taking over the space or by straightening it. Engineers have a tendency to, if there are any engineers over here, pardon, but have a tendency to make irregular shapes regular. They believe that the river is generally lazy because it takes a long way to get from point A to point B. The shortest distance is a straight line. So normally they tend to straighten it. And that really reduces the ability of the river to carry storm waters and aggravates flooding in the hinterland. I show this because these are salt pans and marshes on marshland. Again, a very important feature of coastal Tamil Nadu. And I show this because this is a way of extracting value from the land without necessarily changing the characteristic of the land in a major way. Because when the water comes, these lands are for the water. There is no salt production. There are no people. They leave. And when the water starts receding, you start evaporating the salt water and producing salt from it. It's a way to extract value out of the land without killing the golden goose. I'm talking about a story from Chennai. In 2015, we had a massive flood, and the government and much of the media tried to blame it on a lake that behaved very badly, and said that the lake breached its banks and spilled the water into a river, which also behaved very badly, and of course the climate also behaved very badly. This is exactly the time when the Paris Convention was happening, and there's a massive amount of water in the city of Chennai, and most of the houses, and it became international news because we had BMWs floating along with small, really humble mopeds. And if it was only mopeds floating, you wouldn't have heard about it. But fortunately, we had the BMWs also going down, and so everybody got to hear about it. And from the climate change convention was happening. However, this was not so much about climate change. There's a tendency to say this storm has come. Is this storm climate change? Even without that intense a storm. Chennai would go under. If it rains, it will flood. And if it doesn't rain, we will have water scarcity. That's the only way. We kind of limp from one disaster to another. And the reason for that is not climate change. The reason for that is land use change. And of course, with climate change and with the more frequent and more intense, extreme weather events, we are likely to feel the effects of it in a much harsher way. But the only way you can really withstand that is by having wise land use change. You can't really fight the climate change part of it. So this is the makeup of, this is the lay of the land for the city of Chennai. And it has 3 rivers and 3 river mouths. The northern river is called the Kosasthalayar. You can just refer to it as the K River. And this is the Kumam River, this is the Adyar River, and I live right here on the beach. The land is actually flat. It is a piece of land that cannot flood. It's a piece of land that water does not stay. So when Chennai was originally settled, they had to find some way to make water stay because you cannot have a settlement without water. And all the blue dots that you see, there's not a single one of those except for the long lines, which are natural. All of them are artificial, human-made water bodies. And these were very elegant pieces of engineering. It is not this kind of mad rush engineering of today, where you're taking stuff from there, bringing more stuff from there, and trying to put things together. It is a very energy efficient way of constructing a water body. They just scoop out a hollow and make a bund along the direction of where the water flows and allows the gravity to do the work. So all these are human-made irrigation tanks that allowed for settled agriculture in this area. Of course, the earlier day engineers, their preoccupation was to make water stay, and the engineers of today want to make the water run away very quickly. So when when there is heavy rainfall, we get a rainfall called the northeast monsoon. We sometimes get it, we sometimes don't, because the northeast monsoon is like a very rowdy, very misbehaved monsoon. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it doesn't come. When it comes in one day and pours the entire year's worth of rain in just one day. Or it takes, it kind of gives it dribbles and makes us expect for a whole season and then disappears. So the trick about settling in Chennai is not to complain about the rain's not coming, but to take the water when you get it. And so this network of tanks did that, and then the excess water from the tanks would run off into the rivers. And open land, as long as there's open land, tanks don't fill up until the land itself is soaked. So you leave the land open, the land soaks, the water first goes in and then runs off. And so you have, even after the tanks have gone dry, the water from the ground in the higher gradient starts moving in the surface and fills up the tank. So you have a much longer hydrological cycle for the land area in these places. You also have the excess water then coming into these seasonal rivers and leaving to the sea. And you have a sandy beach over here that protects you from the sea's extremes. Now, these 3 river mouths are not just exits for water, they're also entry points for the sea. As I said, sea is it's a big real estate shark, wants to constantly get in. So you also need to ensure that you have a strong defense in the form of mangroves and a whole graded defense along the estuaries to ensure that sea stays where it does, where it should. So this is a story of Chennai's development. So in the southern part of Chennai, right over here, is a 50 square kilometer marshland called the Palikarnai marshland. And this Palikarnai marshland drains an area of about 250 square kilometers. So all the rainwater that falls there, after it soaks the earth and runs away, comes into the Palikarnai marshland and then has to exit through this very small canal. And the reason why the exit is always very small is because the longer the water stays away, this is all natural, but the longer the water stays in the marshland, the better it is for the city. And these areas are all classified as Porambuk, as commons. You cannot construct on it, you cannot buy it or sell it. So for ages, these lands have been left open. But in 2005, the government of Tamil Nadu was looking for lands for industrialists. Some of these industrialists are extremely rich and they have very large corporate social responsibility portfolios, but they wanted cheap land. There is no cheap land in Chennai. So the government started carving out pieces of water. So in this floodplain, they carved out 385 acres of land and handed it over to IT companies as the ELCOT Special Economic Zone. So many of these IT companies do work for New York and for Chicago and for other big businesses over here. A lot of the back office and a lot of the code is written in these areas. There are companies like Wipro, Infotech, Mahindra, Tata Consultancy, very big names. They are considered to be, they call it the knowledge corridor. They call it themselves. They call themselves, the knowledge gurus. They call themselves very intelligent people, but they build in water. And of course, when the floods came, there was water till the second floor in this area. This is another tank, which was constructed maybe about 600 years ago, called the Velachery irrigation tank. And as you can see, this is a 1970 Survey of India map, largely unencroached. There are no encroachments in the water body. This is in 2015. The entire water body has been filled up with construction. This is the casualty of the information technology explosion. That explosion also takes lives. And as you can see over here, this is all the people who are working in the IT companies who are constructed inside the water body. And then they complain that they got flooded. Lakes don't get flooded, lakes get filled up. If you have a house inside the lake, then that house also gets filled up. And so that's what happened in this instance. Now, next time it rains, it will again fill up because this is where the water goes to stay. Water has a memory, it will come there. You can't ask water to go elsewhere. This is another tank called the Sholinganallur tank, which has now been constructed. Often it has been said, especially after the floods of 2015, there were a whole bunch of journalists who started writing that this is a result of unplanned development. This is proof that it is not unplanned development. What you see over here is straight lines. Straight lines means engineers have been at work. So they've actually plotted this area and said, okay, they called it the ARI scheme or the lake scheme. So this is a scheme for which the government of Tamil Nadu applied for a loan from the World Bank, and World Bank did its due diligence. And you had a whole bunch of extremely intelligent policy wonks and other environmental experts look at this, approve it, and gave it the go-ahead. And they constructed a layout, a planned layout with borrowed money. We actually borrowed money to fill our own water bodies. And this is the result of it. Of course, this is also underwater. And because they have a garbage dump over here, this is not just water, it is water plus garbage inside their houses. This is a very bad place to be. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is that what we call growth is actually decline. And growth itself seems to be a terminal disease. So you have in Chennai, as Chennai grew, the built-up area, I'm sorry, I don't have it in miles, the built-up area is 47 square kilometers in 1980. So the city limits remain the same, and within the city limits, 47 square kilometers of land was built up, and by 2010, it has gone up to 402 square kilometers. So water has to go somewhere. The wetlands have reduced from 186 to 71.5 square kilometers, and as a result of which, you have actually just made yourself more vulnerable both to when the water comes and when the water fails to come. So this is a very happy sight of planes behaving the way they should. There are also ships, they're called airships, but here they are in the water. And this again, this image also made it very big, made the thing very big, because this airport, they built a second runway, they extended it into the Adyar River. And while extending it, they said that we have consulted all the environmental engineers. And we also have permission from the Ministry of Environment in Delhi. And then the residents went to court, and the Supreme Court has said it is okay to build this runway. The water did not think the same way. And so the entire airport flooded. Supreme Court was proven wrong. The Ministry of Environment was proven wrong. And there's a huge loss. Now they're trying to see how they can address this problem. They still don't get it that the runway is in the wrong place. They're now trying to figure out whether we can somehow bypass and make the water go in a different direction. These are some other, this is another 4,000 megawatt coal-fired power plant that is coming in a place, near a place called Pondicherry, south of Chennai. And what you see over here, all those blue dots are again those irrigation tanks. And the red color is the power plant, not yet built. And the place where the coal ash from this power plant will be dumped. Now, this area is the upgradient of the Bay of Bengal. So the ash that you dump over here will find its way down, contaminating all the water bodies and making you more vulnerable. This is a very rich agricultural region. We fought against this for 6 years, and the plant is not likely to come up. But this is just a design that they had. I'm just talking about how harebrained the scheme of development is. This is another proposed power plant which we are fighting. We might lose it. And that is a 1,000-acre water body called Tharuvai. Tharuvai means a big water body. And out of this 1,000 acres, 700 acres has been parceled off for the construction of a power plant. This is a place in the northern part of Chennai, in a place called Ennore, which has the unfortunate distinction of being a convergence point for a large number of Government of India's development schemes. It's a place where Make in India meets Smart City meets Sagarmala and Bharatmala and all those things. And so this is a place that is really screwed. What we have over here, this Ennore, the area that I showed you, is basically a large tidal creek. And this is a very large river called the Kosasthalaya River or the K River, the northernmost river, that comes down from here and empties into this backwater. There's a very small opening through which all this water must flow out. This river is most of the rivers in South India are seasonal. So when it rains, all the flood water comes gushing. So until the day before the rains, it looks like a thin Madrasi guy. And then all of a sudden, when you have all the water running and coming, it's very impressive. It breaks the banks, goes far away, and there's a lot of water coming. It has to go out through this small exit. And so the water has carved for itself a very large backwater area called the Ennore Creek. And this backwater area is about 15,000 acres just in this region. And as long as that 15,000 acres remains, it is a Porambok. It is three classifications of Porambok. One is called Kadarkadi, which means the area here, the seaside Porambok. Then you have the Uppangadi, which means the area where the salt water comes and goes, and it's called a saltwater floodplain. Again, supposed to be left open to the ground, or open to the sky. And then you have the Kadaveri, which is the freshwater Porambok. So all this 15,000 acres has not been touched by anybody until some bright sparks, educated God knows where, came here and said, hey, there's some land out there. Now these places, as I said, I mean, they don't look very impressive when they're not working. They only work for about 4 or 5 months in a year, which is probably what we should all be doing. And in the 4 or 5 years, that place takes on a very different look. The rest of the time, it looks like, as I said, a very common, ordinary, lungi-clad, beedi smoking Madrasi. And so that land has been parceled off and converted as real estate for industries. So this is the creek, and what you see over here are all things that have come up inside the creek. You have a large coal yard, you have a port, and you have another port, and this port brings in coal. That coal is stored inside the river. There is a power plant over here. There is another power plant inside the river. There's a coal ash pond of the power plant. There's an oil terminal over here. So these are areas that are intensely used by the fisher folk. So there's a pitched battle by the fisher folk against further encroachment of the river. And I think I can say that we will be winning. That is the hope. But there are good signs that we can win this game. This is how it looks. The riverbed is full of coal ash. Here's a child playing on coal ash. There's a place called the Buckingham Canal, which cuts through the river. And that canal bed is completely choked with ash from the power plants. There's more planned for this area. There's about Adani, which is a very famous or infamous company from India, best known internationally for its designs in the the indigenous regions of Australia, where they have a coal mine plant called Carmichael Coal Mine, and a big coal port planned in the Great Barrier Reef. This company wants to construct another mega port over here, which will be 8 times the size of the other 2 ports combined, and take over the entire wetland inside as well. This is again something that is under severe, there's a severe resistance to it by the region's fisher folk. Interestingly, in all these cases, there has not been, the people who are talking about keep coal in the ground do not fight against large development projects. Because the myth that is being propagated is that we can have this kind of development, which is the more jobs and more growth and more prosperity, just by changing the electricity source. I think that is a lie. I think there's a problem with that. And a lot of the kinds of proposals that are being put out currently are talking about how we can have all the good things without rocking the boat. In fact, I think that even if it is possible to have the good things without rocking the boat, it would be a lost opportunity to rock this boat, because this boat is begging to be rocked. And that is what the fight that Lado Sikaka is talking about. The elder from Odisha is talking about rocking the boat. He's talking about a different kind of a boat that needs to be out there. And that conversation is not coming out very clearly. Lest you think that this is a third world problem, this is not. This is from the land of the free, from United States. This is after Hurricane Harvey. Again, as you can see, all these would be what is called Porobok, or common lands, which are lands that the water decides to use once in a while. So you stay out of water's way. And here they have, of course, built extremely, this is very high income group housing over there, but water had no respect for those billionaires and occupied all that area. Because in the Texas area, I find that it is not very different from Chennai. They have these slow moving rivers called bayous, and the bayous tend to move this side sometimes, they move that time, then the other side sometimes. And as long as you leave that spaces, those spaces free, and only occupy safe spaces, you will be safe. But if you take over those spaces, even with, and all this is done by people who have degree from University of California, Berkeley on land use planning and urban planning. So you have a lot of actually brain energy going into creating disasters like this. This is Hurricane Sandy, and this is like the sand island I was talking about, sand dunes. This is called a barrier island. A barrier island makes itself seem as if it is land. It is actually not land, it is sea. And it's just temporarily land. And for people who are stupid enough to think that it is land and build these construction over here, this is what happens. After the Hurricane Sandy, you had a tidal surge that came in and ripped apart an entire piece of the island. This has happened in several places on the Long Island, New Jersey stretch. Kattupalli, which is where the northern part where Adani intends to build its port, is also a barrier island like that. And we're trying to prevent them from doing this, because if this gets breached, then we have water coming into the land, and the map of India will be altered substantially without any Pakistani help. So the proposal that we're making is, we need to, in this whole fight, even if you're framing it as a climate fight, I think that there needs to be solidarity going out to those communities that are fighting against the copper mine, against the large road, against the airport, against the coal port, or against even large solar power projects. In Texas, in North Texas, I understand that Exxon is investing in a very large solar park. And that solar park is being invested in because solar electricity, the price is going down. So that electricity is now going to be transported north, so that fracking, which is an electricity intensive operation, can use green energy. So now you will have green fracked oil. And you'll have green jobs coming out of that. So I think that what we need to, our vocabulary needs to change, how we define problems need to change, who we understand these problems from, who should articulate these problems from. Those spokespersons need to change. I think institutional experts have occupied illegitimate space. They've stolen it from the people who really have the wisdom. And I think the institutional experts must be asked to step aside. We need to have community leaders, the elders coming and telling us how they see the problem, so that we can all address those problems together. I think we keep talking about building resilience. We have a large number of international NGOs that have come to India, who have come to Chennai. There is 100 resilient cities, there are 50 resilient cities. So many different programs by Rockefeller and Ford Foundation and God knows who all, who want to come and make this, who want to make the city they want to build resilience in the city. The problem is that my city became vulnerable because of building. And how am I going to build more resilience? I would like to unbuild the resilience. And if Chennai has to have a chance, then we need to figure out how to shrink it. How do you degrow the city? How do you have economic activity spread around, but not the same kind of an economic activity, a different kind of an economic activity? I would just like to end with one song which we shot. A lot of this has to do, it is not a technological issue, it is not a technical problem, it is not even a legal problem, it's a cultural problem. It's a problem of what we value and what we think is worthless. So as long as we say that the coal under the ground is worth more than the forest sitting on top of it, our value system is messed up. As long as we say that the sand dunes and the beaches are not as valuable as the port, I think that we will run into the same problems again and again. So to try and reverse this value system, also to reclaim this word called Porambok, and celebrate the concept of commons. We made a song, which is called the Chennai Porambam Paadal.
So first off, like let's give a round of applause to thank Niti for that.